I'm Madison and welcome back to my channel. Today I have some small town romance recommendations for you. So I started reading small town romances last year and I have fallen down a rabbit hole. They are one of my favorite tropes of all times. You say small town romance, I say give it to me right now. So today I think I have 8 small town romances to recommend to you guys. This is in no means an extensive list. I will continue making more small town romance recommendation videos as I find more and more and more. And I do have more than just these 8, but you know, then the list would have gotten too long and excessive and blah, 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 blah. So I'm gonna give you 8 today. Some you might know, some you might not. So let's just get right into it. I'm gonna start with an author overall that you need to be reading for small town romances, because if you're not reading this author, you are doing yourself an exceedingly massive disservice. That author is going to be Corinne Michaels. Now, Corinne Michaels is an author I discovered last year and have since become a hoe for. I'm an order by author for Corinne. She is just so freaking amazing. She has both regular men covers and special edition covers of her books. If you are curious, these are 2 of her series that I have read so far. Now, this series does take place after the events of this series. They are no way connected, except for the fact that the Parkinson siblings, who this follows, one of them is the ex of one of the characters in this book. They do have a bit of crossover potential. You don't need to have finished this series to read this one, but if you feel like reading stuff in order, you can, but they're in no way connected. I read book 1 in this before finishing the series and it wasn't the end of the world. Come Back for Me by Corinne Michaels. Read this last year, one of my favorite books that I've read in my entire life. This book changed everything for me. This series is the Arrowood Brothers series, follows the Arrowood Brothers, takes place in Sugarloaf, which is a really small farm town. Now, all 4 of the Arrowood brothers have not been back to Sugarloaf in years because their dad was an alcoholic, abusive piece of shit. So when they all came of age, they vowed that they would never return. When their dad passes away, the 4 brothers come back to, you know, inherit the will and inherit the farm until they find out that their dad put in a clause that if each of the brothers doesn't spend 6 months on the farm, then that means that they don't inherit their portion of the will, and then the will would be defunct and the money will revert elsewhere. So the 4 brothers each take turns spending 6 months on the farm, and when they do that, they end up falling in love in the process. So this is book 1. This is Connor's story. Connor is the youngest Arrowood Brothers series. He was in the military. He just got honorably discharged, and he doesn't really know what he's doing with his life now. So he's more than happy to spend 6 months on the farm, kind of like revamping it so that they can sell it once they all have done their time. And one day while he's doing this, a little kid shows up and he's like, who are you, child? And she's like, oh, I come from the farm next door. And he's like, oh, okay, I need to return you, child, to your family. So he goes to go do that. And when he goes to go return this little girl to her mum, he sees her and he realizes that it's this woman that he had a one-night stand with around about 7 or 8 years ago before he went into the military. And this woman is Ellie. Now, Ellie, 6 or 7 years ago, had a one-night stand with this amazing man before she married her husband the very next day. Her husband, who is an extremely abusive piece of shit. And so it is Connor and Ellie falling in love again from their one-night stand 7 or 8 years ago, where they had that one-night stand and they've never been able to forget about one another, and they've always like kind of held on to that night as like their beacon of hope throughout all the shitty stuff that they've been through. Now, this book does have massive trigger warnings for abuse because Ellie is actively abused by her husband in the beginning of this book before she does get away from him, and there is no cheating involved in this story at all either. You know, the processes and everything happen, and I just freaking love their story. It is so beautiful. The entire time Connor is just like, you have been through a lot. Like, I'm here as a safe space for you. I'm here so you don't stay at your house anymore. Like, you can stay at mine from everything, but I want you to know that this is a safe space. I'm here to listen to you. I will not do anything that you do not ask for. I'm not going to step over any territories, like not make any lines or anything like that. Like, whatever you want, I am here for. And he was just such a sweetheart to her. And then also with the child as well. The child was so adorable, so feisty, and their romance was just utterly beautiful. I devoured this so quickly. It just pulled at all my heartstrings, and it was just a phenomenal 5 out of 5 stars story. You need this. I obviously have to talk about one of the best small town romances that everyone has probably read, but maybe doesn't realize is a small town romance, and that is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, which just is turned into a movie. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see this as a movie. I just know it will be great just because, you know, Schitt's Creek as a TV show was great, so how can this not be great? It's like a a movie, my hair must stars. So It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. You are following Piper Bellinger. The Bellinger family is very rich, very affluent, and Piper is such a huge party girl. She's also like an Instagram influencer, and one night she ends up pushing things a little bit too far when she throws this party and she ends up getting arrested. And her stepfather says, that's it, I'm cutting you off for the entire summer. I'm actually sending you to where your father and your mother met, like, you know, her biological father who passed away when she was a kid. She's like, I'm sending you back to their hometown, your parents' hometown. She ends up going with her younger sister. The two of them are cut off. They have no money. They're trying to make ends meet. They have no idea what they're doing there. She rocks up in like a party dress and high heels, and this is a fishing town, a very small coastal fishing town. And they see her and they go, what the actual F is this girl? Like, who does she think she is? And that is where we meet Brendan. Brendan is a king crab fisherman. He is the captain of his own boat, and when he sees Piper, he goes, this girl is trouble, but I'm also extremely attracted to her. And so he is this very grumpy fisherman. She is this sunshine and a half, like, rich girl, and their romance is so satisfying. Brendan is such a grump at the beginning, but then once he like softens to her, he is like, I worship the ground that you walk on and I want to do anything to make you happy. Like, the amount of things that this man does just to make her smile, my heart. But Piper, while she gives me Alexis vibes, she also really gives me Elwood's Legally Blonde vibes, because everyone sees her and thinks that she's kind of like a dumb and ditzy blonde when she's just never really had the chance to fully prove herself and put herself against anything. And once she really does, she ends up finding out that there's so much more to her worth than she ever thought, because she's always been consistently put down and kind of just told that she's nothing more than just a pretty face. And I really connected to Piper. I thought she was such an amazing character and I just loved her to death. This was such an amazing romance and I highly, highly recommend it if you've somehow not picked this up. Now, if you really loved It Happened One Summer and kind of want something that's like in that same vein, Drive Me Wild by Melanie Harlow. I recommend this to everyone who has loved It Happened One Summer, because this feels like it and it's so fun, except you trade in a grumpy fisherman for a grumpy mechanic. Yes! You have Griffin. He is a mechanic. He owns his own mechanic car garage place where he fixes car anyway, let's pretend I actually know what I'm talking about. And one day he is with his friends. They're eating at a diner, just chilling out, when they see this car crash very slowly. And they're like, what just happened? And out of the car comes this absolute debutante, gorgeous drop-dead woman wearing a massive ball gown and a tiara. And they're like, what the actual F is going on? And that is when we meet Blair. Now, Blair was an heiress, except her father embezzled money. And so once he did that, she was actually kind of happy, because that meant that she got to go out and live her own life, because her ultimate goal in life has actually always to be a baker. And so when all this happens, it's because she's trying to like start anew with her life, trying to like start everything. The problem is that she doesn't have a penny to her name. So she crashes her car. Out comes Griffin to see her, and he's like, hey, I will offer to fix your car for you. She's like, great, thank you. So he goes to go fix her car, except for the fact that, you remember, she ain't got no money, so she's got nowhere to stay. And he ends up finding her, trying to sneak back into his like parking lot that night to go and sleep in her car. And he's like, you can't sleep in your car. And she's like, well, I have no money. And he's like, okay, you can come stay at my place until like I get your car fixed. They end up actually having forced proximity, because she ends up like basically moving in with him, and they are so funny together, because like she doesn't really have like any of the street smarts either, and so she's really confused by a lot of things, but she's also super organized and super amazing, and she makes the best desserts ever. Everyone literally comes and brings their car to the garage just to have her desserts. And I was like, I'm gonna love this. This is actually surprisingly steamy. There's a lot of role play in this. I would say this is like a solid 3 to 4 on the spice scale, probably a solid 3.5. Because the role play in this was delicious, and it was way steamier than I expected, and it was just an absolute blast and a half, so I highly recommend this if you have not checked it out yet. We then have Indigo Ridge by Devney Perry. This is book 1 in the Eden series. There is a prequel novella to this that you don't need to read, but I did because it was fun. It's a Christmas one. So this is set in Quincy, Montana, and in Quincy, Montana, there's a very prominent family. They are the Edens. There's like, the mom and dad had like 17 freaking children. All the children have their own like business there. Basically the Eden family, while they're not like the richest, most affluent family, they're just everywhere. You can't avoid them. And so you're following Griffin Eden. He is the brother that currently owns like the farm, which is like where they all started, and like looks after like that part of the family business. And then you also have Winslow Covington. Now Winslow has just moved to Quincy, Montana. Her grandfather lives there, and she's just moved there to become the new sheriff of town. And everyone doesn't like her because they think that she's an outsider, even though like her family's from here, she didn't grow up there, so they think that she's an outsider, so no one really wants to talk to her. Her and Griffin, with the very first time that they meet, is at a bar, and they don't know who the other person is, and they end up having a one-night stand, and then the next day end up seeing each other and introduce each other to like work together, and she's like, oh my god, this is a bad idea. So they agree, like they're not going to do anything again, they're going to try and avoid each other, but of course they can't avoid each other because what happens? A dead body turns up on Griffin's land, and everyone thinks that it's a suicide, but then Winslow looks into it and she's like, you guys have had a lot of suicides over the last couple of years, and this is kind of suspicious because it's all at the same place. And they're like, it's suicides. And she's like, not really when you look at the national average, and there's a lot of things that aren't adding up here. So she ends up having to work with Griffin to find out what's going on with these girls dying, and they uncover a very sinister plot. But it's also a really cute small town romance at the same time with like, you know, a bit of murder and death sprinkled in there. Really enjoyed this. I would say it's like a 2 out of 3 on the spice scale. They do bang a couple of times. They're super, super cute. Really love them together. So yeah. If you're not going to read any Mariana Zapata but one, read this one. Trust me. So this is a small town romance. We are following, what is her? Aurora and Rhodes. What is Rhodes' first name anyway? I don't remember. So you're following Aurora. She just got divorced from her husband, who was a really, really shitty person and gaslighted her entire life. She ends up taking that settlement money and moving back to the hometown where she grew up with her mum, who passed away many years ago. Well, her mum didn't pass away, her mum went missing when she went hiking. But Aurora moves back to that town, and when she gets there, she ends up renting an Airbnb above a garage. And so she moves into this Airbnb. She's a happy little camper until this big man with a gun walks in and says, what are you doing on my property? And she goes, what do you mean, what am I doing on your property? He goes, this is my place. She goes, okay, this is an Airbnb. He goes, this isn't an Airbnb. And she goes, what do you mean it's not an Airbnb? I paid, it's an Airbnb. And then in comes this teenage boy being like, Dad, I can explain. And he goes, don't tell me you did this. And he goes, I want the money. And he goes, we don't need the money. And she goes, if you guys need money, I'll pay double the rent. Just please don't kick me out because there's nowhere else I can stay near here because everything else is booked. And so she ends up paying like double the rent and they let her stay. But the sheriffy dude guy is like, he's not a sheriff. What is he? He's a park ranger. Mr. Rhodes is a park ranger. He goes, fine, you can stay. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear a peep from you. I want you to be an invisible Airbnb owner. She goes, easy peasy lemon squeezy, not a problem. I'm just here to kind of reconnect with my childhood, my mum, and go hiking. And he goes, whatever. Of course, they fall in love slowly. Very slowly. This is a slow burn. They don't bang until like this part through the book. They don't even kiss until this part through the book, and then they probably bang at this point. I will say though, when they do bang, it was hot. Very, very well done banging scene, considering that there's only one. Delicious. But yeah, basically it's them falling in love. Very much slow burn. I really loved it. I was actually quite surprised at how much I did love this. There is also like a music rock and roll aspect to it because she was formerly a songwriter, and I really love the shit out of this. I highly recommend it, and I feel like a lot of people avoid Mariana Zapata because she is slow burn, like even I did that. But I was so pleasantly surprised with this book, so I highly recommend it. Next I have one, oh, I love this book so much. Everyone else hates it. Okay, we have The Confidence of Wildflowers by Micalea Smeltzer. So this is a small town, age gap forbidden romance. The age gap is 18 and 31 years old. I've had a lot of people on the internet get mad at me for this age gap, but it is legal, first off. And a lot of people also don't like this romance because there is a massive trigger warning for the last 10% of this book that is absolutely brutal, will rip your heart out, throw it onto train tracks, run it over with a train, throw it into a blender, blend it up, and then pour it down a garbage disposal, blend it again, and then chuck it into the sewer. So if you have triggers for death of a loved one, please check out my Goodreads review because I do spoil it under a spoiler tag if death of a loved one is a trigger for you. Okay? We clear? Good. There's also technically cheating in this, but it's fine. We have Salem. She's 18 years old. She's got her boyfriend. They're supposed to be the perfect couple, but she's just really not happy with life. She doesn't really know what she wants to do. She's feeling really unambitious. Her boyfriend's about to go off to college. He's like, come with me. Like, it's fine if you don't like know what you want to do. Just like be around me. She's like, I don't really know what I want to do. And then next day, this man ends up moving in next door with his little kid. He's Thea, he's 31 years old, he has his own landscaping business, and he ends up hiring Salem part-time as a nanny whenever his son comes and visits from his divorced wife. And the two of them end up sparking like this instant attraction to one another, and then the course of this book is them kind of falling in love and having their romance, and then it ends tragically in this book, and then there's a duet, there's a second book that takes place like 7 years later after the end of the first book. It is so beautifully written. There are so many times that I wanted to quote this book. I was consistently underlining it. Micalea, I devoured this. I devoured it, one of the easiest books I've read in my entire life, but it is set in a small town. But it's a very angsty, emotional one. So this one has the most different vibe, I would say, out of any other books on this list. So do go into this with a lot of warning. But I really do love this series, but please don't come at me if you don't like it. And the last book I have to give you guys is Teach Me by Olivia Dade. This is book one in her Something About Marisburg series, I think it is. This is a romance between Rose and Martin. So Rose is a US history teacher at this high school. She has been for years. She's really cultivated it. She's got her honors students, her AP students, her regular world history students. She loves them until one day a new teacher comes in named Martin, and the head supervisor of the school is like, JK Rose, even though you've done all this shit for years and your students love you, I hate you, so I'm giving half of your classes to Martin. Suck it up. And she is pissed. She's pissed. Okay, but Martin's a newly divorced man who came to this small town because this is where his wife took his daughter, and he's like, I want to be with my daughter for her senior year of high school before she goes off to college, so I'll move. So Martin's just trying to live out his life and figure out his shit until he finds out that he's basically ruined this other woman's life. And so instantly, you know, Rose doesn't like Martin. She's kind of very cold to him, but Rose as herself, she's like just a grumpy character, whereas Martin's pretty sunshiny, but she's just a naturally like kind of standoffish person. She doesn't really like to let people in because she's divorced as well, and her previous marriage was just not great for her. It was very debilitating on her mental health. She's still very close with her in-laws. Her in-laws are like the best characters I've met in my entire life. It's their romance. It's actually very, very healthy romance. This is one of the healthiest romances I have read in my entire life. It is so realistic, so beautiful. The way these characters communicate, the best communication you will see in a couple in a book in your entire life. Like, I'm no joke. I read this book, I finished it, and I sat there and I go, that is the healthiest relationship I've ever read in a book. Like, is this ever a book where you want to throw it at someone and be like, do this, and like whack them with it? That's this book. It's crazy. Like, I really, like every book on this list was a 5 stars except for this one, which was a 4, because like, it's not like an all-time favorite of mine, but it's just a book that I have to recommend because like I've never read anything like it, really. And yeah, I hope you guys in this video. If you guys have any small town romance recommendations for me, please also leave them down below because I'm always looking for new ones. They're like, I devour them like they're catnip. Anyway. Let's stop, Madison. Okay, if you guys are in this video, please hit the like button down below if you want to see more of me. Please subscribe to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch, everyone. Bye-bye.